Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again, where today we are continuing our look at the Christopher Wood James Bond movie novelization duology. The last time I looked at his novelization of The Spy Who Loved Me, called James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me, and if you didn't see that video, to sum it up, I thought that it was a really great continuation novel. It felt like it still had a lot of that Ian Fleming DNA in it, which I really appreciated. Here we have James Bond and Moonraker, which is a very similar situation, but ultimately it loses some of that DNA and perhaps is more influenced by the movie portrayal of James Bond that I think makes for a lesser product, really. Like last time, I'm going to be talking about the plot kind of in relation to the film. Like, if you've seen the film, you know what the broad strokes of this plot are, so I don't feel like I need to necessarily go through it beat by beat. I'm going to be talking, though, about some of the broader elements and some of the differences from the film, which are actually far fewer, I feel, in Moonraker's case than The Spy Who Loved Me. It really is the same story. I mean, a Moonraker space shuttle is hijacked and James Bond is sent to investigate a Hugo Drax and travels around the world following clues alongside an ally and Dr. Holly Goodhead, and eventually the pair are led into outer space where they thwart Drax's attempts to eradicate a huge chunk of the world's population with a deadly airborne poison. The beats are very much the same here as in the film, but I will say I really felt the breakneck speed in which the book zips around from place to place, and this doesn't really enter into your mind too much when you're watching the film, but, in Moonraker, Bond does a whole load of travelling, and there are plenty of action sequences, and pretty much all of them are here in the novelization. But good lord, the breakneck speed it goes at, I just wanted a break. It feels so much more action-heavy than The Spy Who Loved Me that the actual content of the book itself, Moonraker, feels a little bit thin. The beats are very much the same here as in the film, but I will say that I really did feel like the book moved along at a breakneck speed. It just zips around from place to place, and there are so many action sequences. Pretty much all of the action sequences from the film are transferred to the novelization. And the book isn't that long, and to cram all these things in, Bond will be, zipping around all over the place from chapter to chapter, and there's no kind of, breathing space like what you get in Fleming of him to kind of settle into a new environment and hear lots of different things about those environments and Bond, how he perceives things. There's kind of none of that, which, there's a lot of action in it, but compared to The Spy Who Loved Me, the Christopher Wood version, Moonraker just feels quite thin. Bond teaming up with Goodhead just isn't as sparky as Bond Win a Massacre in the previous book, and I'll get more to talking about this when I talk about Bond himself specifically later on, but he's such a smarmy pillock in this one. The book just on a whole ends up kind of lacking any real substance or deeper meanings or themes or intentions, because none of that exists here. I mean, the action sequences are really well described and play out, dare I say, better than the action sequences in the film do in some places. And I was never bored when I was reading it. It'll keep you entertained, it's just that there really isn't that much going on beneath the surface in this one. In terms of what differs from the film, I mean, one of the most notable changes is that Drax's pilot, who Bond meets towards the start of the story, who is Karine in the film, in the book here is a perky American lady called Trudy Parker. I assume that the film had to cast a French actress in the role, given that they were filming the movie in France and everything, and, they have quotas that they need to fill, but it would have made more sense in the film for this character to be American, because obviously Drax's chateau, whilst being brought over brick by brick from France, is nonetheless in America. Trudy serves the exact same purpose as Karine, though, and even perishes in the same way, but unlike the film, we don't experience her being chased through the woods by the dogs, but rather Bond is informed of Trudy's fate by Dr. Goodhead, which prompts him to actually have a moment of reflection. He's genuinely, oh crap, because of me, this, young lady is dead. That's not good. Unlike in the film, where we never see him learn this and never have a moment of reflection about it. In the book, when he's riding around on the gondola, he's, ruminating about what a dirty business it is that he's in, and in the film, obviously, we don't get that. I don't think there's anything going through Bond's head in that sequence other than, how the hell am I gonna get Dr. Goodhead's panties off? There are small differences throughout, pretty much in every chapter, and especially in some, like, just little details in the action here and there, like in Bond's fight with Chang. Before he throws the henchman out, like, through the clock face, Chang has body parts, like, actually crushed by the huge grinding gears at work in the clock that they're fighting in, and in the climax, in space, Bond actually wears a full proper spacesuit, and there's no, like, hovercraft gondola in the novelization either, or double take pigeon, unfortunately, though I think we would have all appreciated a good couple of pages describing to us the inner thought process of the pigeon as he witnessed such an incredible sight. The use of Jaws differs too quite a lot from the film. He isn't present at the free-falling action sequence at the start, which is in the novelization, and he only really appears halfway through the book when Drax calls up the henchman hotline. There's no Dolly either in the book, and so for all the longest time I was reading it and I wasn't sure whether or not Jaws was actually gonna make that shift over to the good guy's side at the end, but he does. And it does kind of make you realize that for all of the complaints we have about Dolly and Jaws in that film, at least it gives Jaws some motivation for, like, switching over to Bond's side like he does. I mean, in the novelization, he doesn't really have any clear drive or motivation for doing what he does. Here, he's just, like, totally evil, and then Bond says a couple of lines, and Jaws is like, huh, yeah, I guess I am a little bit freaky looking compared to the rest of these people. Maybe I should, like, switch sides here? And yes, obviously I know that Bond has words very similar to the novelization in the film as well, but Jaws looking to Dolly in the film for the reassurance and the encouragement just speaks volumes, and I actually appreciate that moment in the film so much more now after reading the novelization. Weirdly, Jaws does get a female companion to travel back down to Earth to in the novelization, but it's really random. Like, he's in this little compartment just as Bond and Goodhead are going to go out and laser the poison globes, and then it just says, like, oh, some woman came up and banged on the door and he let her in, and then off they shoot. So let's talk about Bond, shall we? Because the Bond in the novelization is very much described as the Fleming version of the character, up front, and, you know, with the cheek scar and all that kind of stuff, but in reality, reading through the book, he is so far away from that version of the character, I can't tell you. Like, I talked about in my review of the novelization of The Spy Who Loved Me that I get the feeling that Christopher Wood was really more influenced by the Fleming Bond character than he was by, you know, Roger Moore's on-screen portrayal, which was still, I'm sure at the time of writing, until The Spy Who Loved Me movie came out, Roger Moore's sort of version of the character wasn't really set in stone, whereas in James Bond and Moonraker, I feel like Christopher Wood saw The Spy Who Loved Me and was like, oh, okay, I guess I have to write what he's doing on the screen now. But when you take some of that writing and some of those lines and some of those attitudes, like, without the Roger Moore delivery, they just come across so smarmy and irritating. Like, I find Bond really irritating in this book. And it's not as if it's, like, part of a character arc or anything, and it really just doesn't gel with the more grounded, more serious moments that the book still does have in some capacity. I mean, you know, when he's, like, reflecting on his actions and how he's caused the death of other characters, or how horrific it is to see people sucked out into the vacuum of space, that's all kind of put on the back burner because instead we just have gag after gag and cheesy line after cheesy line. So when it comes to supporting characters, one of the weirder aspects of this novelization is that, like, okay, so Spy Who Loved Me, the movie, had pretty much absolutely nothing to do with the Ian Fleming book. The film version of Moonraker took the villain's name, and the novelization takes that name too, but goes further in really presenting the character as Fleming's Drax. It's really weird and jarring because the Bond in the novelization is set up as being Fleming's version of the character. And then when we get to meet Drax, who is also described as Fleming's version of the character, it's just kind of this weird, out of continuity, I mean, space. It's really strange. Though the character of Drax is described like he is in the Fleming book, when it comes to how he speaks, he is very much a different character. It's just kind of weird because reading James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me, you can kind of fit that in with the Fleming continuity if you want, because it is such a separate thing from The Spy Who Loved Me. And even with like they share a character with the Fleming from Russia with Love, it felt like it was a part of that continuity, whereas with Moonraker, I guess Fleming's Moonraker just didn't happen in this continuity, or maybe the Christopher Wood duology just needs to be counted as like its own completely separate thing to the rest of the novels, and that's probably how they treated the book. But The Spy Who Loved Me really did feel like a proper continuation novel. This feels like some kind of strange remake, and that's largely down purely just to Drax himself being here. Dr. Goodhead is probably my favourite character in the book. I think she's really good and spunky and proactive and super smart, and even if her relationship with Bond doesn't have that same spark as with the Massiver in the previous story, she's a fun character all the same. Jaws is back, but very much just as a blunt instrument for Drax to wield. I will say though, he does come across much more threatening on the page than he did on the screen in Moonraker. In the film, he and Bond kind of have a cartoony relationship going on where Jaws doesn't ever really seem to want to get Bond, and Bond's just kind of treating it all like it's a big game and the chase between the characters and whatnot, and that's kind of what you get the sense that they enjoy. You know, they're not looking to really kill or harm each other, it's just like, I'll get you next time, buddy. Here, he's a terrifying hulk of a man, and until the very ending, you know, when there's the abrupt switch and he turns over to the good side, he's still quite an imposing figure. Just one more character I would like to talk about, though, and it's kind of incidental, but it really did make me laugh, and it was one of my favourite things in the book. Minister of Defence Frederick Grey is here, and much of the last chapter is dedicated to that character. We get a lot about him. Like, he's going into the satellite link up at the end of the film where they project Bond on the screen and they're linking up to dignitaries and all that kind of stuff, and he's just so proud, and he's going in and he's like, oh, I'm gonna be the next Prime Minister after all this is such a great achievement, and he's just so pompous, and I just kind of love all that stuff, because we don't really get any of that in the film, I don't think. And of course it's hilarious when that pomposity is popped when the satellite link-up comes through and Bond is taking Holly around the world. Overall, I had a lot of fun with James Bond and Moonraker. It's a really easy read, it's just not going to have quite the same impact on you as the previous novelization. The other Christopher Wood novelization, I think, can enjoy a certain higher standing when it comes to these novelizations, or even, just the Bond continuation novels in general. I mean, that feel like Christopher Wood was writing the Bond book that was in him, and he got all of his ideas out, and this one reads more just kind of like he was typing away while he was watching the film. Which is, that is kind of, what a novelization should do, I guess. It takes the film and pretty much copies it straight onto the page, but I needed something extra to really make this work as a novel in its own right. So that's kind of it for this little era of literary Bond wilderness. We've had a selection of rather odd continuations. I mean, we had Colonel Sun, which was, to be honest, I thought going to be something of a template for how other authors would come in and carry on with, straight down the line, very entertaining spy adventures. But no, instead of that, we had strange, fourth wall-breaking biography and 2 novelizations. But next time we will be looking at the John Gardner Bond novels. Finally, another author is allowed to come in and have a good run at it. There are 14 novels and 2 novelizations to look at in his chronology. So I'm ready to get settled, actually, for another author to come in and really leave their stamp on the literary Bond universe. I've heard very mixed things about the Gardner era, though, I'll say that much, and so I'm slightly apprehensive, but nonetheless, I'm looking forward to some continuity in these continuation novels. So that's it for this time, Bond fans, and if you are one of the, I'm sure, probably 20 people left alive who has actually read either of these novelizations, then please do leave me a comment below with your thoughts, because these are quite niche pieces of Bond lore, I think, and I'm really interested to hear sort of like other opinions on them. It's not the kind of thing where you log into sort of like, Facebook groups and that, and you have a really big, long discussion of people commenting, talking about the Christopher Wood novelizations. These are very niche, but they're super interesting all the same, and have a lot of great talking points. So, yeah, please do leave me a comment in the comment section below, and as always, please do head over to my Twitter, my Facebook pages. Please like this video if you have liked it, and if you would like to see more videos of me talking about James Bond related things, then please do subscribe to this channel. And until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.